Alright, so we're taking a break from Ranked with the channel. We're going to be playing in these Explorer events going forward when we show Explorer content. This is just to guarantee a full playoff set. Running into a lot of people now that are just playing one match in Ranked. If it's a bad matchup, they leave, or if they get a bad hand, they won't even play out the set. So these are basically Arena's equivalent of Moto Leagues. So we pay 700 gems or 5,000 gold to enter, and we play 5 matches regardless of our record, and at the end we receive a reward based on our wins. Should say this is best 2 out of 3. Just entering, we'll get 50 gems in a random pack. The random packs are from any non-standard set. 2 wins gets us up to, 1 win gets us up to 100 gems, 2 wins 150, 3 wins 600 gems, 4 wins 800 gems, and finally 5 wins will get us 1000 gems, some playing points, and some packs. Now, the key thing here, difference from Moto, is Moto, if you can get 3 wins, you basically make your money back. If you want to do it here, you have to get 4 wins. So we're going to take the 80 card list we were using last month in the ranked videos. It'll be in the description below, and we'll just see how this goes. So we'll jump into game 1. Alright, we are into our first match of this Explorer event, or Explorer League. And we're up against Black Burl 808. Scores in the bottom right. Good hand, got our lands, got interaction. We'll see where our opponent's playing. And they start with a cleric class, so it looks like a mono white life gain deck. Voice of the Blessed supports that theory. We drop a Triumph to guarantee a Fable next turn, or a Wandering Mind to dig, depending on what we need. Inspiring Overseer, draws a life, gains a card. We drop the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and we pass back. We have a guaranteed Supreme Verdict here, so we just wanted to commit a creature or 2. Take 3 down to 14. We loot away one of our cards to find another Wandering Mind. Swing in with the Goblin. Our opponent chooses to trade. Deploy our Blood Crypt, shocking it in. Supreme Verdict down to the... Opponent follows up with Fountain of Renewal and a Birth of Melitus. We flip the Saga, crack a Fable, Fabled Passage, sorry, I should specify. Hit a Wandering Mind, digging, find a Leyline Binding. Good answer to any threat they might future have. And now we have the interaction of Fable and Wandering Mind set up here. Fortunately, they deploy an Angel of Sanctions. They ultimately exile the Reflections of Kiki Jiki. End step, we're just going to Vanishing Verse that to reset the Saga. Gives us another Goblin Shaman. We top deck our Niv, so we'll get in since they're tapped out and can't kill anything. And reload.
Reload!
We hit a Wandering Mind, Colligan's Command, and Tyrant Scorn. 3 good cards to answer / dig for stuff. Opponent drops a Righteous Valkyrie. Has 27 life, so all their creatures are pumped, so we just remove that with Tyrant Scorn. Saga flips back, we go to combat and reduce their life total. The critical life total for this deck is 27 because that triggers Righteous Valkyrie and Speaker of the Heavens, so anything we do to keep them below that is perfect. Opponent levels up Cleric class, passes back. We draw another Leyline Binding, which is reduced to 1 mana. Activate the Saga to get a Wandering Mind. Find the Solitus. Cast it for the reason of looting, I guess. Swing in, opponent blocks. They go down to 11. They are dead on board currently. So in their upkeep, when they draw their card, we are going to Colligan's Command, force them to discard and destroy the wall. So their only options now is crack the fountain, draw a card, hope for board wipe effect to stay alive. They don't find it, so they pass on to the next game. Mono White life gain is basically like Celestia Angels, but a bit slower and more emphasis on Soul Sisters. So we bring in the portable holes, take out a Drown in the Lock and a Celestus and a Kaito. Sadly, Kaito, we love you, but Kaito draw on a board full of Flying Angels is pretty bad for us. Also, the blocks make it awkward for us to get his activated ability. They drop a Fountain. We choose to drop a Triumph. They drop another Voice of the Blessed. Now we have a portable hole, so we can play a tap shock land, so we don't have to pay any life, and exile the Voice to keep him down. On 3 mana, they play a Birth of Melitus and a Speaker of the Heavens, as we were saying before. We go up to 3 and drop the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. They drop the Angel of Vitality, so they're very, very close to getting up to 27 life here. So we attack in with our Goblin. They choose to block with a wall, not trade anything, so we shock in here. I decide a bit greedily, I think, not to fire off this Solar Blaze because I want to hold back and see if I can score a bigger hit. Maybe force them to burn all their creatures thinking they have it. But then I realise that they're about to get above 27 life, so I don't want them making 4/4s. Opponent is up to 5 mana. They deploy an Angel of Sanctions, which is now awkward because it's one of the creatures that will survive a Solar Blaze. We go down to 14 from the attack. Flip the Saga into Reflection, so this is another reason being greedy was bad. We have to lose both our creatures here. We get lucky and they block with the Angel, which then means this Solar Blaze is lethal, and we can portable hole away the last token. We throw out the World Tree and pick up blue to cover all of our bases now, because we were missing a blue mana. They drop an Angelic Overseer and a Luminarch Aspirant, start pumping it up. We choose to Tyrant Scorn the Overseer, drop another Fable to start generating value that way. Our opponent embalms the Angel of Sanctions and removes the Fable. Our opponent pumps that up with the Luminarch. Choose Vanishing Verse, get rid of the token, reset the Saga again. Move to combat, make a treasure and attack. Drop the Wandering Mind here. Find another portable hole which we can cast off the treasure from the Goblin. Remove the Luminarch. Opponent's at 30 life, so every life gain event they have now is active. They only have 1 card in hand though. We top deck Niv like the lucky person that we are, and we go in for an attack. Make 2 treasures, ding them back down below 27, drop another Niv Mizzet. Reload with a Clarion, Assassin's Trophy, another Wandering Mind and a Vanishing Verse. So we can answer pretty much anything they could have right now, particularly with them being mono white. They take out our enchantment, so in Spite we take out their Aspirant. And we have them on basically a 2 or 3 turn clock here. They draw a card, and they ultimately concede from the game. And we go 1-0 in this league. Next match versus Queenie. Opening 7 is trash, so we mulligan. This hand is pretty good. I choose to get rid of Niv here because basically to get Niv on the field we need to draw both a black and a blue. And if they're an aggressive deck, which they turned out to be with this mono red, we basically want to get Edgar on the field as soon as possible. Our opponent appears to be stuck on 1 land, so we might get lucky here. Faces of Commune and flips, so we go down to 13 from the attack. We drop a Wandering Mind to divert some of their things here. Choose a Path of the World Tree because it fixes our mana and will give us late game. We go down to 9 off this attack, so we choose the Supreme Verdict since they're still on 1 land. They pass through, which is great for us. So, choosing to use Path of the World Tree to pick up a land to cover all our bases here, we can now deploy a Wandering Mind. Find a Leyline Binding, which is now 1 mana. Opponent goes Burning Tree into Karizev, which could be scary, but fortunately we can go Leyline Binding, remove the Karizev because of her menace, and play Edgar to hold back. Our opponent goes to combat, we block, they choose to stomp it, and Edgar flips and starts churning out our life linkers, which is perfect what we want right now. So choose to use the Path of the World Tree here to just continue making land drops. We have answers for any threats they might deploy, so tapping out to spend a Niv here is a bit ridiculous, so we're just going to hold back. And it's good because they drop a Faces of Kimono, we immediately exile it. We need those off the field since the flip side is an answer to our Edgar. So with both of them gone, we play a tap land, go to combat again, gain the life back to 8. Super late game, our opponent finally hits their third land, drops the Bone Crusher Giant, Edgar flips back here, we can gain back up to 12 life, and our opponent concedes. We got lucky there that they missed the land drops, so we need more board wipes, more answers to small creatures, and this is where the removal gets a bit weird. We take out the Celestus, and we take out one of the Edgars, and one of the Assassin's Trophies, because we do not want to give them lands. If they're a low land deck, saving 2 damage but giving them a land to cast their big spells could be dangerous. This hand is solid for us. We are missing red mana, but you know, we never didn't have it. We get domed with a Play with Fire. We drop a Triome here because it reduces the cost of our Leyline Binding. So now we get hit with a Lightning Strike, we're down to 15. Fevered Champion domes us for 1. We play the Sungrove here because I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that I could actually Growth Spiral into thing, but they drop a Torbrand, so that's an immediate emergency Leyline Binding. I get rid of the Knight here because what I can do now is deploy all these things, wait until they try to get value off the Torbrand by doing something and removing it from combat. So they drop a Fevered Champion and they immediately go to try and combat, so I choose to Leyline Binding, get rid of Torbrand to just take 1 damage from the Fervent Champion. We drop our land here, enters tapped, and again we're just going to play conservative here. Our opponent taps out for Den of the Bugbear, so before it even resolves we Vanishing Verse it. And then Tyrant Scorn the champion. So we've stabilized now at pretty good life, so we're just going to drop on Mizzet here as our blocker. I consider it, but then realize that, you know, the worst they could do is animate the land. But they can do that, so we go up 2-0. We hit this win, we get up to the 600 gems, which is the big jump point now. Solid 7, we've got ramp, answer, and fixing. So we can cast pretty much anything we could draw here. Our opponent mulligans, which is a good indicator. We drop a Triome. Opponent reveals Raktos, so this is probably just the Raktos mid-range deck. Choose to drop a Ragged Triome to cover all of our basic land types for the Leyline Bindings if we draw one. There's the Blood Tithe Harvester as expected. Choose to Growth Spiral here, put into play a Fabled Passage. What I'm trying to do is, because we're drawing a lot of lands, is just do the most things we can do to remove lands from our deck. So grab the Forest, play the Path to the World Tree, grab another basic, pass the turn. Our opponent drops a land, goes to combat, downs us down to 17. We draw more lands, so this is looking pretty grim here. Our opponent loots away with the blood, dropping a land, indicating they probably have a ton of lands in hand. They go for the footsie, so I respond to Assassin's Trophy just to get use out of it. Yes, giving them a land is pretty tough here, but I'm assuming since they loot away a land that they already have enough lands for what they want in hand, and they're not exactly going to burn us out of nowhere. So, end step, we loot away one of the lands they know about to find another land and draw another land. That little shake of the mouse is me saying, "Are you kidding me?" We put Yorion into hand here. Bit of a distraction. They Takamaya, mill 3 non-creatures and just get back their Blood Tithe Harvester. They are really looking for an answer here. End step, we're just going to crack the Fabled, get another land out of our deck here. and cycle another Triome to try to find more answers. We find a Leyline Binding, which is pretty okay, and we find a Tyrant Scorn. So they 100% have removal here, so what we're going to do is play the Yorion and so 4/5 but we won't. They drop a Sheldred's Edict, which is bad because that means I must be holding more hard removal. They go in, so since I played the wrong land, I'm just going to use the Tyrant Scorn here to kill the Blood-type Harvester. What I want to do is just buy time. Opponent drops a Croxus, so I choose to Leyline Binding it now. This way it saves us discarding 2 cards. We could wait till they escape it, but that would trigger it basically twice and we lose 2 cards. So we drop our Shapered Foundry, they flip a Graveyard Trespasser. We play a land and I choose to pass here, which is kind of a bad choice because I'm just gonna pop the Path to the World Tree at the end step. So here's what's gonna happen. They attack us, exile a card from our graveyard. The Graveyard Glutton is a 4/4, but we're gonna regain 2 life here. So end step, Path to the World Tree, dome them for 2, gain back 2 life, draw 2 cards. Opponents are reading this because they've never seen this happen. We find Vanishing Verse and Kiki Jiki, which is great. They stomp our bear, which is rude. So first things first, Vanishing Verse the Graveyard Glutton. Move to the ward, discard the Triome. If if Arena decides to catch up. Then deploy a Fable because it's needs 2 answers basically, just like when we play against it. They need to kill the token and get rid of the Fable itself. They have another Sheldred's Edict, but we're both down to 1 card each here. I'm holding Yorion as a potential blink effect here because what we want to do is maybe blink the Fable of the Mirror Breaker again, like we did in the earlier game. Opponent's in the tank for a while here, considering. We find the Celestus here, so we ultimately need to find a hard answer for this Bone Crusher, so I choose to loot away both. We find a land and a Vanishing Verse, so first things first, I'm going to play the Yorion here and go for the blink. If the last card is a removal spell, as I suspected, I'm going to trade that for Bone Crusher. They have no creature lands. We get to reset the Fable here, so we've got essentially a creature, a loot, and an endgame threat coming. They pass back, we loot away, find Kolaghan's Command, which is perfect for us. So we check our graveyard and I realise there's no Nib Mizzets yet. I attack first to try and bait out the last card and choose to trigger Kolaghan's Command, forcing them to discard and return Yorion to our hand. Turns out it was a land. We can play Yorion here, reset the Fable, get another token and another loot to find more answers next turn. Our opponent finds a Sheldred, we top deck the Vanishing Verse like the lucky bugger that we are. Get rid of that, pass the turn, go to combat, make a lot of treasure. Our opponent top decks their own Fable. We top deck a Kaito, which is game because Kaito is +1, can make it so that token can't block and we can swing in for lethal. Whew. Sideboarding again, we want Portable Holes and Fort Caesars and probably the Solar Blaze because there's a few bigger things. We take away the Celestus, drown in the lock because they have Croxus, they're probably going to try escaping their graveyards. I decided against the Rest in Peace here because it's too much of a commitment based on the 1 card in their deck. We go down the Kaitos because I'm thinking they'll bring in more Planeswalker removal since they saw a Kaito in the endgame. But then I ultimately decide to just go 1 Kaito here because apart from the Blood-type Harvester, I haven't seen any other small creatures. This hand is good for us if we can draw a land. We can cast pretty much 3 of our removal spells here. We immediately get Fort Seized. Realizing that we can cast pretty much everything, they just go for a the Path to the World Tree to stop our fixing. They play a Blood-type Harvester. We find a Fort Seize here. So I ultimately decide to not do anything. I'm going to just remove the Blood Type Harvester before combat here. We've missed our land drop, which is getting very scary. They go blank, so we just get rid of these two Culligan's commands we can't test. We draw another Leyline Binding, so ultimately I get rid of the Fable because it's too much value for them. Our opponent decides they will deploy the Blood Type Harvester. We draw another Thoughtseize here, so we Thoughtseize and take away their go blank after I have to read the Black Sun's Twilight because I've never seen the card before. But unfortunately, we've now missed our land drop again, and our opponent has some blood to loot here, so they loot away. Ultimately, they duress us, remove the Vanishing Verse. We again don't find lands, which is crazy. Opponent loots away their land, must be nice for them. So we decide to rush out of Leyline Binding here to block. Opponent plays the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. We drop another Leyline Binding here to get rid of another Fable. But ultimately here they Thoughtseize, take away one of our Fables. If we don't draw a land here that we could immediately cast a Fable, it's pretty much over. Because they can, and we don't even draw a red source, so this match has got away from us here. They can activate the Hive. We're dead in 2 turns, so we'll just pass and go into the deciding game. Keeping the deck the way it is. Alright, this hand is great, but you know we're going to get Thoughtseized, so we're keeping it purely because you can see how excited I am. They actually have all 5 colours here based on Triumph, so Triumph to cover, play another Triumph here. We did not get turn 1 Thoughtseize, which is interesting. They drop a Reckoner Bankbuster, so I decided to drop the Fable here, because as I've said many times, it requires 2 answers for decks like this. They Bone Crusher the token. We choose to loot away, so I loot away a Steam Vents. Sorry, Stomping Ground. And we find Edgar. So, deploy Edgar. As I've said before many times, because of his hard to remove effect. He's basically something that has to be answered here. The opponent is reading him. They activate the Bankbuster to draw a card. They duress us, which is lucky that wasn't a Thoughtseize, so their only target's the Clarion. They know the Niv's here now, so we've got to deploy it as fast as possible. Reflections flipped over. We hit a Wandering Mind, another Clarion and a Vanishing Verse, because you always hit what is Thoughtseized away. Bankbuster draw. Plays a land. They drop the Sheldred's Edict, which is a problem with this deck. Is not this deck, is this card is in certain situations the edicts are just terrible. So we get a Wandering Mind here to find a Leyline Binding, activate Reflections on the Wandering Mind, find a Thoughtseize, Thoughtseize them immediately, remove the Sheldred, which is their only threat. Yeah, so this one kind of got away from them, I think. Opponent draws. Plays a land, activates the Bankbuster, finds a Sheldred, but knows that we have a Leyline Binding, so they can't stop us. So we take down the 3rd game. Moving into game 4. Kyber. This hand is beautiful, but no lands. So we move down to our lands here. Get rid of the Culligan's command. They're great if we've got some in the graveyard. And once again, we see Raktos Thoughtseize off the top. They take the Fable of the Mirror Breaker. They now duress us, take away our Growth Spiral. We draw another land, which is perfect, so we'll just drop the Ziggurat's Proving Ground. We draw Niv Mizzet, which is a problem here because there's probably going to be not removal, so we get stomped. It's probably going to be a Thoughtseize before we get to the mana. We move to our end step. I choose to kill the Bone Crusher and take 2 from its static. It's better than getting hit in the face with it. So This is perfect here because, well, it's not perfect because I screw it up. We get fort seized as I knew we would, so we'd lose the Niv Mizzet, but the Colligan's command is great protection from that because we can just return the Niv Mizzet to our hand. So, with no other options here, we draw a Celestus, we drop our tap land, they drop a Wreck and a Bankbuster. In their end step, we activate this, we choose to return Niv Mizzet and blow up the Bankbuster. They draw a card in response. We now untap and deploy Niv, but before that we're going to crack a Fable to thin out the deck. We hit a Wandering Mind, Scorn, Clarion and Assassin's Trophy, so we can answer pretty much most of what they would play here. Our opponent uses a Sheldred's Edict to kill our Niv Mizzet. They drop their Blood type Harvester. We drop another Triome, use the Tyrant Scorn immediately and drop a Celestus. We want the life gain / eluding effects that this card can bring. Fortunately, the auto tapper decides that I would rather cast no spell than to leave a green open to cast the Assassin's Trophy. So we untap here and I get rid of the Clarion because our biggest problem here is their creature lands which we can't answer. We get a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, pay that. Shock in here, so we can cast now both the Assassin's Trophy and the Leyline Binding. I choose to loot with the Celestus because this hand is great, and if I find something better though, I'm going to hold on to it, which I do. So I loot away the Assassin's Trophy they know about, and we can hold both a Vanishing Verse and a Leyline's Binding. They push our token, they go to combat. I choose to use Leyline Binding here because exiling the token is a freebie, because we now have enough mana to pull Yorion from our sideboard and cast him on the same turn, which will let us Leyline Binding whatever threat they deploy in the late game. They hit a Blood type Harvester which we can't answer, which is unfortunate. We draw Kaito. My boy Kaito. Alright, we hit a Kaito, and they have to take a significant time to read because they've probably never seen this card before. Ooh. We -2 to get the drone. We're going to protect the Kaito here if we can. We choose to swing in here. Now they have to kill this if they've read the card right, and it looks like they have here because they loot away to trigger Revolt and kill the Wandering Mind. We put Yorion into hand. Now here's the beauty of this. If they go for the Hive Tyrant activation, which they do, to kill Kaito, we can Vanishing Verse the Hive and trade for the Blood type Harvester. Which they move to combat, so we exile. They float a black in response, so I'm a bit worried, but they fizzle it. They go for the attack here, so we'll trade with the Death Toucher that also gains us life. We activate the Celestus. Oh, we don't activate the Celestus, sorry. We draw a card with Kaito. Now we choose to deploy the Yorion. I choose to blink the Reflections, Kaito, and Leyline Binding here. We get an activation of Saga 1, get a token, we exile their blood token, and we have Kaito with more loyalty. So it's just a grind fest of what we can do now, and if we can... So they deploy Sheldred, we Vanishing Verse it. They know that we can just bounce Yorion every turn with Kaito, so they concede. Another match with Raktos, so there's not much to say here in terms of the sideboarding. The one decision I make here that's slightly different is I choose to go down a Kaito because they've seen one and they've seen the synergy with our deck, so they probably bring in more removal to deal with Planeswalkers. Since they didn't see a Niv Mizzet that game, I'm hoping that I can surprise them with a Niv Mizzet this game if they've sideboarded for more Planeswalker heavy. But it is finally great to actually show the synergies of Kaito in these games. Sun's on the screen, move the curtain. Alright, this hand is... oh, this game. This game is crazy. This game is a poster child for why we need to remove Fable from the format. Our opponent goes aggressive with their creature lands, we pass the turn, they play a blood type harvester, we growth spiral, we draw the third, repeat that, the third copy of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So we just start deploying it. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, drop a Triome here, pass the turn. Our opponent doesn't go to combat but instead uses the blood type to kill it, which is a bit strange, but whatever. They hit a Shieldred, so since we don't have an answer here, it's going to be painful, but I have to get rid of 2 lands to find an answer, which I do thankfully in Vanishing Verse. So I Vanishing Verse the Shieldred, play the second Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So the danger now, which is what I'm going to go for, is another Shieldred. If I can get 2 reflections on the field active, we draw a Leyline Binding, which removes Shieldred immediately. If we get 2 reflections on the field and one of them active, we can make the infinite Kiki Jiki combo based on our mana. So we loot away lands to look for another thing, we just find 2 more lands, we deploy our third Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Our opponent, scared of a double flip Fable, is removing them as fast as we play them. But I'd like to point out this is our third copy of Fable of the Mirror Breaker here in our 80 card deck. Our opponent activates Hive of the Eye Tyrant and goes aggressive here to just start attacking. We can't block because we don't have Menace, and we draw our 4th Fable of the Mirror Breaker. We flip around the reflections, we choose not to attack, but we'll make a 4th Fable, attacking with 2 mana here. We're going to hold up the Kolaghan's Command because we can kill a Mutavault, force him to discard, and play for, if we can make 2 reflections and get to our opponent's end step, we have near infinite mana here. So we play the Mutavault, wait for the activation of the Hive Tyrant. They go to combat here. I choose to force them to discard and do 2 damage to Mutavault. They discard another land. We go down to 4. We draw a land here, but we're able to flip. I decide to decline because I'm just going to use the mana here for the flip. I'm going to hold tokens back to block the Hive in case something goes wrong. Our opponent plays their Fable of the Mirror Breaker and passes through. So we go for an activation. And they know the line here, so they know that we have this. They pass, they concede. So we go 4-0 from the power of Mirror Breaker. Final opponent here, Kaders. This hand's not acceptable, so we'll mill down to this. I get rid of a Growth Spiral because I don't have the mana to cast it. And our opponent opens with Thoughtseize, displaying Raktos again. Yeah, but you know, there's no danger, there's no problem with the meta right now. We just played 3 matches of Raktos back to back. Our opponent Thoughtseizes our hand into Oblivion, and ultimately we don't draw green, which is problematic. Our opponent gains a Graveyard Trespasser. Again, we don't draw green, so we just pass the turn. They swing in with the Graveyard Glutton. They play a Misery Shadow. We do not draw green again, so we just play a Yorion. With the hope of being a blocker, but if they display hard removal here like they do with Lily, this game's pretty much got away from us. So we're gonna go back here. Right. Standard removal. There's literally, like, you saw how quick I was at that now. Back to back to back Raktos games. Yeah, I do have a good matchup versus these, but I do think we need to do something about it, particularly the prevalence of Fable of the Mirror Breaker. We keep a good hand here, expecting to get Thoughtseized, so it's all good, but we can at least use Tyrant Scorn to answer a threat. We have all our lands covered, but surprisingly the Thoughtseize never comes, so we pass through. What is our opponent holding that they have nothing to do in the Raktos deck for 2 turns? The answer is a Stomp. We get Stomp for 2. They deploy a Bone Crusher. Again, we choose to take 2 from the static rather than get punched in the face for 4. We draw a Vanishing Verse, which is a good answer to whatever they play on their turn. They throw down a Shieldred, so we get rid of that before we take any life. Then we get lucky, and so we didn't get 4C, so we deploy our Niv. We hit 1 card, which is
Reload!
Which is my boy, as I've said many times before. I would also just like to point out this here. They see this, they pass back. So we deploy an Edgar here for the purposes of the hard removal. Our opponent, we swing in for 6, putting down to 13. Our opponent has an answer that can exile one of these creatures. And they, to their credit, realize how hard it would be for them to take out Edgar. So they would rather remove the 4/4 than the 6/6 flying dragon with Extinction Event. We drop our Fable, swing in, put him down to 7. Our opponent end steps Fatal Pushes but takes a Bing off the Pain Land, so they're down to 6. They drop a Graveyard Trespasser and eat their own Bone Crusher to not die to this attack from Niv here. They put a Wreck and a Bankbuster on the field. We have Lethal with the Colligan's command. I choose to discard cards, make it look like I'm digging for something, and then go to combat. I want to make sure this damage goes through. They may have something to do before then. Then it's just shock and blow up their artifact, put him down. And we go to the deciding game for the 5-0 here. Again, nothing to say, just going in. We've been pretty lucky with this league. We dodged some bad matchups. We had no real control decks. We just ran into Raktos midrange, aggro, and yeah, creature-based aggro decks. Good first attempt. Right, final game. Our hand is questionable, but I keep it on the strength of I can go for the World Tree if I have to, if we don't draw well. Opponent draws first though, but we do have an answer to anything big they want to play. Naturally though, we get lucky and just hit a green source off the top. So the only thing we're missing here is red. Oh no, not red, sorry. We have basically all our land types here. So I use Path the World Tree to get a land out of our deck. Another reason I do this is, as I've said before, Path can just be great to just buy time over a thing. They're down to 3 here, so I choose to Vanishing Verse the Fable before they get to loot. I'm hoping their hand's pretty bad. They drop a Shieldred, which is pretty rough for us, so I'm going to choose to Leyline Binding it immediately to not take any damage. Yes, I do have the board wipe, but I want to save that till they commit a few more things. Wandering Mind digs in and finds us a Tyrant Scorn, which can bounce it back to our hand in an emergency. They go for the Duress here. They take the Tyrant Scorn, which is interesting. They go for the attack, so I just consider the trade. They drop a Graveyard Trespasser. I just go with the Supreme Verdict just to save not discarding a card. I play the Overgrown Tomb here because I can at least cycle the Zagatry Triome if it gets later in the game. Opponent loots away. We find another Path to the World Tree. Grab a red source. Use the path. Find another land here. This guarantees the activation of the path. Our opponent is stuck on 4 lands and doesn't seem to have too much to do here. End step, we cycle away the Triome to find another Triome to draw another land. We pass. Opponent goes into combat, so we'll just activate the Path to the World Tree in their end step. Gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, make a bear. They drop a Shieldred, so in the upkeep we exile it. Move to combat, and our opponent has seen enough, and we made it to the illustrious 5-0. Okay, so my plan of making this a series to get eventually a 5-0 has been stumped at the first one, so first event we went 5-0. Absolutely fantastic, loved it. So here's what you get for going 5-0 in one of these events. We get play-in 4 points, use 20 play-in points to enter a qualified play-in event, 1,000 gems, so a profit of 250, and 3 random non-standard packs. Well, hope you enjoyed that. So to summarize, we had a great run-in. We ran into Raktos Midrange 3 times, and we then, yeah, we just solved it. So we'll do this in the future. We'll spread these out, but they might not be every week, but every other fortnight. Hope you enjoyed watching.